Jules from Tarot Adventures with Jules here. I am super excited to be interviewing Shaniqua Leash from That Afro Drip this afternoon. So I'm just waiting for Shaniqua to arrive. I've got a bunch of notes here, so I might be referencing them. I've been following Shaniqua's account for months now, and I'm really enjoying following along with the process of the creation of this absolutely stunning deck. Definitely check out all of her illustrations on her website, and she has some work in progress videos that are really amazing. And yeah, the illustrations are stunning, and it's a really lovely deck. So I'm just gonna wait and see. Yay! I think that I should be able to add her in just a moment. Let's see here. There we go. So let's see here. Hi, it's so good to
Hi,
see you.
how are you?
Excellent. How's your weekend going?
Pretty good so far. No complaints over here.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me to have this chat. I've been following
Thank
along
you
with
for
the
having me.
creation. Oh my gosh, my pleasure. Yeah, I've been following along with the creation of that Afro Jet from early stages, and it's been so amazing to see all of your work in progress videos and the evolution of the deck as you've been creating it. And I made a few notes, so I'm just going to reference that if that's all right with you. But I'm just to start with, I'm so curious to know. I ask everybody this that I know who does tarot. What drew you to this practice in the beginning?
Oh, that's a great question. So I used to be an atheist. I was like, if it's not quantifiable and demonstrable and repeatable, I don't want
Mm-hmm,
to hear about it.
mm-hmm,
Um, and after I gave birth, after I became a mother, I just felt like this was not just a chemical process that happened inside of me. I made an entirely new consciousness, and I was just, I guess you could say, like, spirit kind of smacked me and was like, you know, I'm real. You know, I'm here. I might not be real in the way you were taught to think I'm real, but I'm here.
yeah,
Um, and so I started kind of investigating because my intuition just got really, really strong after I gave birth. I would get very strong vibes about people, knowings about like paths to take home, just random things. So I
yeah.
started kind of investigating, and I got this book called E Squared by Pam Grout, which is it appealed to my atheist mind because it was based around experiments that you could do to test the theory that the universe is consciousness and that it listens to you and we can manifest with it.
Mm-hmm,
So the third experiment, I was supposed to ask for a gift from the universe and be as specific as I possibly could without naming an actual thing. And I was still trying to like make the universe fail back then. So I wrote out a list of traits that I considered like self-contradictory and impossible to produce. And I
mm-hmm,
remember like I said something along the lines of, it has to be something stunning, something that's really just going to blow my mind. It has to appeal to the logical side of my mind and the creative part of my mind. And it has to be so uniquely suited to me. I remember I wrote those words. It has to be so uniquely suited to me and my personality that there can be no doubt as to whether or not this thing came from spirit. And
mm-hmm.
I had to give it a time limit. So I had to give 48 hours for this
Yeah.
gift to manifest. And I think it was like 46 hours later, um, YouTube suggested to me like a Tarot 101 video, and it had
Mm-hmm,
suggested it to me months prior, and I clicked on it but left it on pause and just left the tab open
yeah.
forever. And randomly that day I remembered, oh my gosh, I've had this tab open for forever, and let me just watch this video. So I watched this young woman on YouTube explaining what tarot is, how people ask it questions, and it really was intriguing to me because I had never heard of tarot before.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember thinking, you know, this sounds kind of cool, but I don't know if I would want to spend money on a deck of cards because I don't know if I'm going to use them. And as soon as I had that thought, the young lady in the video said, and if you're thinking you don't want to spend money on a deck, what you can do is download a tarot app. And that blew my mind because the synchronicity was just, the timing was eerie. It like shook me.
Yeah.
And so I found a free tarot app, and I will never forget the first two readings that I did with it because they shook me to my core so deeply that I've read tarot every day since then. And I truly consider it to be a gift from spirit because it was just so profound, and it continues to be so. It has lost none of its magical aspect to me. So I know that was kind of a long story, but
Oh, I
I
love
gave
it.
birth and spirit came into my life and was like, you're going to pay attention. And then through those experiments, I asked for a gift and the universe was like, here's tarot.
It's amazing. I'm still thrown off or taken aback, not thrown off, taken aback every day at how tuned in tarot is. Like
Mm-hmm.
I do readings and I follow a ridiculous number of challenges every day and do tons of card pulls, but the synchronicity across each of them, and oftentimes things are brought to my attention. I'll ask about one thing, but it'll bring up the thing that I really need to focus on, and just the
Mm-hmm.
clarity that it's brought for me, it's uncanny. And it's so interesting that you say that about having a child really drawing you into your practice, because my tarot practice is very closely associated to the birth of my second daughter as well. And that was the point where I let my skeptic go on a long-term vacation, and I
Mm-hmm.
really started trusting in the fact that there was something to this, right? Like it
Yeah.
was, because I'd kind of dabbled in tarot before that. I had one Mystic Fairy deck that I'd bought, and I'd maybe pulled a card or two from it. But the day she was born, she arrived 7 weeks early, and I had no idea that she was coming. But I had a friend over for a visit that morning, and I just had this pull to pull out this deck of tarot cards. I'm like, what? Like, what's going on here? So I was like, okay, whatever. I pulled it out and I pulled a couple of cards, and the message that I did one for my friend, and then I did a reading for myself. And the message that I got was, you need to trust your intuition, and the thing you're most afraid of isn't going to be as bad as you feared. Without missing a beat, I said, I'm so afraid that this kid is going to come early because I've been under a ridiculous amount of stress throughout this pregnancy. Sure enough, that was at noon. She was born at 8:37 that evening. And I was in shock through that whole process, because from first contraction to delivery was about 3.5 hours. And I just went from thinking I had like almost 2 months of pregnancy left to this baby arriving. Um, and I was in so much shock that I didn't even really think about it. But then the next day, she's in the NICU. I'm sitting in my hospital room, and I thought, oh my goodness, like my cards gave me what I needed at exactly the time that I needed it, and even trusting my intuitive pull to go and pull them out, right? And it took a while after that for me to get into a daily practice, but it was the reassurance and the faith that I needed that there was something to this thing that was
Mm-hmm.
intangible, that I couldn't, do an equation and figure out on paper, right? Like I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
raised with any particular religion. And so the whole concept of trusting in something bigger than myself that I couldn't quantify was very alien
Right.
to me, very kind of really like, and I still have that kind of skeptic aspect of my brain, which is why I think I need that synchronicity of tarot all the time to reassure
Mm-hmm.
me that, yeah, this is the thing and there's something to it, right? um, oh, thank you so much for sharing that with me. It's always fascinating to see what drew people to the practice, and see, even though our experiences are different, that there's these parallels in how we access this sense of faith and trust that I think
Mm-hmm.
tarot can really bring to us, that there's something more than just us, right? Like
I
yeah.
completely agree. I feel like tarot for me was such a good fit because I consider myself almost equally split between my left and right brain, like the
Yeah.
logical number crunching analyzer and the
Yeah.
intuitive, creative, like sensitive maker person. I
Yeah.
felt like tarot was a perfect meeting of those two because there are the like standard or traditional meanings, which to me appeal to the left brain. But
Mhm.
then when you're interpreting a spread, when this card is in this position applied to this question next to these two cards, that's all
Yeah.
intuition. And it's based
Yeah.
on, a set standard dictionary of meanings, you could say. But two people who are equally experienced in tarot can be presented the same question and pull the
Mhm.
same cards in the same positions of the same spread and have totally different but both resonant interpretations. And that was
Yeah.
just so fascinating to me. I was just like, how is this so accurate? Like, my first reading was, I asked about, like, what do I need to know about self-discipline?
Mhm.
And I received the Chariot. And when I
Ah.
read the meaning ascribed to the Chariot in that app I was using, it was so beyond on point that I was shaking. It was just like, this is so me. This is so
Mhm.
me. And then I remembered what I wrote down on paper. It has to be uniquely suited to me. And that was when the light bulb went off. And I was like, there
Oh,
is something bigger out there that is listening, and if you tune
yeah.
in the right way, you'll get what you ask for. And
Mm.
it's incredible. Tarot is really
Oh,
magical, and I
I
think
love
it's
that
it's
so
it
much.
says a lot that giving birth has brought multiple people kind of into that fold, because it's a magical
Mhm.
process.
Yeah, and it takes you out of yourself in a really
Hmm.
amazing way. Like having had three kids, there's similarities across each of my experiences, but then they're all uniquely different. And each of my kids
Hmm.
is uniquely different. And even their personality types kind of factored into the birth process too. Like my
Mm.
son is a Taurus and he's like very like on his own time and in his own way. And he was a few days past his due date. And I was delivered
He
early
was
after my
comfortable.
second daughter, and yet she came 7 weeks early and it couldn't be more her, right? Like she's always like
Hmm.
raring to go, embraces life with her arms wide open. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then my eldest, it was so funny because she was due in and around the 5th of December and our wedding anniversary is the 14th. And I was like, I really hope that this kid doesn't come on our wedding anniversary because then I'd always feel torn, right? I mean, it didn't really matter if she had, it would have been fine. But she was very accommodating and she came on December 3rd. And like, she's this kid that is so like even keel and just like very,
Grounded.
yeah, very grounded,
Hmm.
very level. Like she's, a Sagittarius sun, but then Capricorn rising and Libra moon. And she's got all of those kind of balanced, like equilibrium. So it was so funny to see kind of in hindsight, right? And
Hmm.
what you said about cards really fitting, like I say this to my husband a lot, like he's not into tarot at all, like he's Mr. Rational, but I mean we've been together almost 20 years, it'll be 20 years in December, and I really appreciate how open-minded he is because he's got this really creative aspect. And so even though he'd never do tarot himself, he's very open-minded and supportive of my practice, and I'm always showing him my posts and everything. But I said to him one day, like what fascinates me about tarot is that there's 78 cards in the deck and you could pull any one of those 78 cards and funnel it through your current experience and it would make sense of what that situation is or what that message is that you need.
Hmm.
That being said, there's certain times where I'll have a question or something that I'm wondering about and like the perfect card comes in the perfect position that just like illuminates everything.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, there's a synchronicity to that that I find really magical. Do you know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
really, yeah. And it's such a great tool. I think and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, but one of the things I find so magical about tarot is it's a personal practice.
Hmm.
It's something that allows me to have my own kind of direct line to my higher self, to my intuition, to whatever it is that's out there and unpack things in a very personal way. Like I don't need to go through anyone or anything in order to find that connection. Do you know what I mean? Like what are your thoughts about that? I mean, yeah.
I totally agree. I think it was Benabel Wynn, if I'm not mistaken, who described tarot um, as an esoteric practice versus being an exoteric practice,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that in traditional, like Abrahamic religions, you had to go through an ordained person as a part of
Yeah.
an ordained organization to
Mm-hmm.
reach God, by confession if you're Catholic, or a pastor if you're some other denomination. But like you said, with tarot, that's not needed. It's you and
Mm-hmm.
the cards, or you can go to a tarot reader.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most of us would encourage that if you have an experience with a reader that doesn't sit quite right, that you shop around, and it's
Yeah.
encouraged to find the reader for you. I think tarot has this amazing way of uniting humanity, because those 78 archetypes are experiences just about every single human can relate to on some level.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't extend your relationship with the cards to being something spiritual or non-physical or otherworldly, what have you.
Mhm.
I think even from a completely skeptical mind frame, you can look at it almost like those Rorschach ink blots, but
Yep.
instead of it having no meaning and it's just like, I want to see what you're projecting onto this image does correlate to human experience. And since we're asking questions, we can sort of, it's almost like interviewing your own psyche if you approach it
Mhm.
from this secular position. And I think that that's
Yeah.
really empowering. So whether you know, use it as a tool to connect to spirit or the divine, or just a tool of personal introspection, the transformative nature of tarot readings, I think, just can't be denied. And that is part of the magic, whether you're skeptical or
Yeah.
not. I think that that's like part of what makes tarot so enthralling.
Absolutely. Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I love that it has, like, for those of us, I'm very much like you, where I'm kind of evenly split between my analytical brain and my creative side, and I could go either way at any given time. And I think one of the things that appeals to me so much is that there's a structure and there's a story, and there's almost like this storytelling aspect. If you look at the Fool's journey through the major arcana and even the minor arcana, there's this progression through each of the numbers, and this is
Mm-hmm.
evolution, and it's this journey. And you know, you can cross compare the numbers through the different suits, but you can also look at the journey of that particular suit and what the energetic is and everything else. And even the court cards, like, I know traditionally it's looked at as like a person in your life or certain characteristics, but I see it more
Mm-hmm.
as aspects that we all embody at
Yeah.
different points in time, and that's what's allowed me to kind of form a relationship with the court cards. But I mean, my kids aren't super into tarot. They're kind of enjoy dabbling in it a little bit. And I have the Way of the Panda deck, and
I
I
love that
found
deck.
that, oh my god, it's so lovely. And Kim's book is just magical, like the way that she's articulated the pandas. And I find the storytelling aspect that she takes and the humor that she brings to it has been a really amazing access point for us, where when we pull cards together as a family to look at it as a story and as a storytelling, and like, what aspect of this panda is coming through and what do they have to say to you, and it's almost conversational. And so it brings in that connection even for someone who's not looking to it as an intuitive tool. There's that story and that progression and that kind of mythology, or archetypes rather, that creates that connection point with the practice. That's really amazing. So there's kind of access on both aspects, which is really cool.
I completely
Yeah.
agree. Me and my daughter actually do the same thing. Our favorite deck to work with together is the Happy Tarot by Serena
Oh, nice.
Ficha, I think her last name is.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the illustrations are just so darling, and like she's
Mhm.
got cotton candy clouds, and some of the
Oh my
wands
God.
are like giant lollipops. It's just so
Yeah.
cute. And I won't tell her like, oh, let's read tarot. I'll just be like, hey baby, let's make up a story. And I'll throw 3 cards out, and she'll say, well, this man has way too many sticks, and he's walking to the guy who's upside down because over here the sword went through the heart, and now they're all sad. And it's just like,
That's so
you're so
sweet.
cute.
But she built her own
Yeah, I love
story and
it.
her own relationship, right? And
Mhm.
that's so cool.
It's
And she doesn't
adorable.
need
I
the
love it.
guidebook. She doesn't need to have this like underlying understanding of tarot in order to make sense of it in a way that
Hmm.
works for her, which is amazing. Oh my gosh,
Hmm.
I love that.
It's so
That's
cute. I love
absolutely
it so much.
incredible. Yeah. So I'm curious to ask, what was the first tarot deck that you bought?
Okay, the
Or were
first,
you gifted it, or how did that work for you?
I wasn't gifted when I started using that app. I started like doing a ton of research into like, what is tarot? Where did this come
Yeah.
from? So for a long time, I thought I had to be gifted a deck, but eventually I was just like, Shaniqua, no one's gonna buy a tarot deck and just hand it to you. Like,
Yeah.
that's, it's just too random for like my inner circle, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so the first deck I purchased was the Golden Thread Tarot. Um,
Nice.
but the first deck I actually physically got and worked with was this one, the Fire Tarot. Um,
Oh, cool.
while I was waiting for the Golden Thread to get to me, my hands were just itching to like get onto some
Yeah,
tarot
yeah.
cards. So I ordered the Bone Fire Tarot, and it got to me first. So I kind of tie them both as my first deck, because
Yeah.
the line art in the Golden Thread was what really drew me, and I was like really excited to get that with the plastic
Yeah.
cardstock and everything. But I was impatient, so I ordered the Bone Fire, and that was like the first one I physically got to work with and cut my teeth on, so to speak.
Oh, amazing. That's fantastic. I'm not actually familiar with either of those decks, but I just made notes because I want to go check them out now, because that's
Oh, I should
Awesome.
have grabbed them. But yeah, the Bonefire is still one of my favorites. I work with it more than the Golden Thread
Oh,
nowadays because
yeah,
the
yeah.
art is like tattoo inspired, and
Oh, I
it's just
love that.
really brightly colored, and she puts so
Oh,
many different symbols in the details and everything. It's
yeah.
like, look at this ship on the Three of
Yeah,
Swords.
that's
Like, this is
incredible.
so awesome. So
Oh, I love that so much. I'm a huge fan of
excuse me.
Jamie Sawyer's deck, like the Sawyer's Path
I
and her
love that one too.
Dominion. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And again, it's tattoo inspired. And then there's even the Tattoo Tarot, which is my most Tarot de Marseille deck. I don't know if it's intended to be, but I think so because it's just the representation of the different suits. But I just love tattoo inspired imagery. I find there's something
Mhm.
really magical about it and the way that the images go together and everything. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So I'm so curious. So what took you from working with tarot as a practitioner to deciding that you were going to create your own deck? What was your inspiration? What steps did you take in that direction? I mean, I know we've talked a little bit about this in messages. I don't consider myself an artist, and so I feel really intimidated. I'd love to create a deck someday, but I feel very intimidated. But actually, my conversation with you opened me up to the possibility of doing so someday. So I appreciate that.
Mhm.
And actually, I'm getting my first tattoo done at the beginning of August, and I actually sketched
Oh,
out
yay.
what I want for myself.
That's
And
excellent.
yeah, and I'm working on a logo right now, and it's something that I created for myself. And there's something really magical about doing that and creating something, and it actually looked the way I wanted it to, and that was
Right.
really exciting. And I was like, oh, I can do this. Like I had the last art class that I took was like grade 11, and I got like a C- on this painting that I did, and I decided at that point that I wasn't an artist and I could never do it. Um, yeah, so that's hugely inspiring to me that you have created this deck and gone through this process of learning the tools and putting everything together. And because I think you weren't necessarily an artist before you started this process, if I remember correctly, like it was something that you did through courses and learning. Do I have that right? I'm sorry if
No, you
I'm
do basically. I've always liked to draw. I've
yeah,
always
yeah,
been somebody who would like, doodle in class and make like a person in the margins of my
yeah,
like
yeah.
note paper and everything. And when I first went to college, my major was actually fashion design.
Oh,
Um,
amazing.
and I loved that, but I switched my major to English because I realized that what I loved about fashion design was the actual making of the clothes and having
Mhm.
something exist only in my mind at first, and then I'm
Yeah,
holding it, and it's what
yeah,
was nothing but imagination before. But
yeah.
when you major in fashion, it's the focus is, you do learn how to make clothes,
Hmm.
but the primary focus is more so on the design aspect, and sewing and making garments isn't really what fashion designers do.
Hmm.
um, so I realized, oh, I don't think I'm gonna be happy like only working with the sketching side of it.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to make something, so I changed my major, and when I did that, I kind of stopped making art. Occasionally I would scribble and color and do little doodles, but um, it was one of those things where it's like use it or lose it. My
Yeah.
art skills sort of steadily, I don't want to say declined, but they did. Like I was like losing a lot of what I had learned and
Yeah.
taking it in college. So when I started reading tarot, um, the the dearth of diversity didn't really stand out to me initially.
Hmm.
I think probably just because as a person of color, we're so used to seeing not ourselves in media that
Hmm.
it didn't even stand out to me. It didn't even strike me that like all these pretty decks that I was falling in love with and buying left and right maybe had two cards in it with a brown skin tone.
Yeah.
It just didn't stand out. And then I
Yeah.
saw a video on YouTube about Tarot So White, the hashtag that was popular a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it just kind of made me question, have I seen a black tarot deck? And I just started
Yeah.
really wondering, why not? I'm sure there are black people that read tarot because I'm black and I read tarot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where is this, lack of diversity coming from? And um, it was at that point that I knew I wanted um, a black tarot deck to add to my collection.
Hmm.
but I hadn't quite made the leap to I need to make one.
Yeah.
Um, I would say in the last like 3 years or so, inclusive and diverse decks have just really been popping up left and right. So
Hmm.
it got to the point where I didn't feel like I was like forced into picking one deck,
Yeah.
because there were a few options, but none of them really had an art style that I like loved. Some of them might
Hmm.
have um, maybe the illustrations were nice, but I would prefer the colors be brighter, or
Hmm.
maybe I love the colors, but the style of illustration wasn't
Hmm.
exactly my cup of tea. And I found myself just repeatedly thinking, oh, I can't wait until my perfect deck comes out. Oh, I can't wait until my unicorn deck comes out.
Yeah.
Um, but after repeating that in my head for months on end, I was just like, how am I going to put it on someone else to make my unicorn deck? That doesn't make sense. And I told myself, Shaniqua, at one point you were pretty good at drawing and sketching and stuff. So what's it to buy like a $10 course on character design and just practice? So I
Yeah.
gave myself a year to kind of just get back into the flow of drawing and looking at human forms and perspective scenes and things like that, to see if after a year of practice, if I felt like I was good enough to make my unicorn deck.
Yeah.
And if you go back like few years on my Instagram profile, you'll see some of like the very first sketches that I did when I
Ah,
started that process. And
yeah.
whew, practice really does make progress, because when I go back and look at those, I'm just like, I put this on the internet. But
But that's awesome too, because you're sharing your process and your journey. And I didn't mean to say that you weren't an artist, just not by trade. Like I find so many people that create tarot decks. Their living is made as an artist, right? And so that kind of intimidates me a little bit. But yeah, that's such an amazing process. So then at the end of the year that you gave yourself to explore, where were you at that point? Were you ready to like jump in? Were you ready to kind of dip your toes in the water? Like I'm so
um
curious to know.
I was terrified, honestly, because it wasn't supposed to be a product. Like, I didn't really
Yeah.
think I'm my own worst critic. I think most of us can say that, but when I'm feeling down, I get really mean to myself sometimes.
Hmm.
And I just, I was like, I'm just gonna do these little stupid doodles, but like in my mind, it was like no one's gonna want to buy something that I make. So it
Yeah.
was just kind of like I'm just gonna, like you said, share my journey, share my progress at getting back into the flow of making art. And I had kind of fallen in love with Procreate, the painting program
Hmm.
that I use, but I
Yeah.
didn't have an iPad, and it's only available on the iPad. And my
Yeah.
mother, the amazing, wonderful woman that she is, surprised me with an iPad for Christmas 2 years ago,
Oh, that's so
because
wonderful.
it was so like I literally cried because
Yeah.
she had an iPad. And a couple months before Christmas, I work in a family business, and I was in her office, and I picked up her Apple Pencil and just started doodling on her screen randomly. And I was like, oh, the responsiveness of this stylus is out of this world. And I had a total nerd meltdown at how nice it felt drawing on the iPad. And my mom kind of cocked her head and looked at me, and I could tell the wheels were turning in her head, but I didn't know what she was thinking. And
Mhm.
then on Christmas Day, when she gave it to me, she said, so
Oh,
now you can start drawing. And I
oh
just
my God.
cried so
That's
much.
amazing.
But the first thing I did was download Procreate, and I had already bought a course on like how to maneuver the interface and everything. I just
Yeah.
needed an iPad, and my
Yeah.
mom gave that to me, and so I started on the Fool, and I asked myself, like, am I gonna do the cards randomly, like just pick up a Seven of
Mhm.
Pentacles from the manga tarot and do that, or am I gonna go in order? And I decided to do everything in order from the Fool to uh, the pips, and then do the court cards, because I had seen several other deck creators say that like the process of making your own tarot art gives you a deeper understanding of the cards. And since, like you said, it is a progression, like from the Fool to the World and from the Ace to the 10 and then the courts, I wanted to linearly understand the deck on a deeper
Mm.
level. So I started with the Fool and renamed it Incarnation, just because I didn't want to pull my own fool card and wonder, is spirit telling me I'm being foolish? Because that's kind of one of the archaic interpretations
Mhm.
of the card, and I
Yeah.
think the name brings that up. So
Yeah.
since I look at the fool as the soul, and like you can almost kind of see the fool in each card of the tarot, like a different
Mhm.
experience, so to speak, I decided, what if instead of this foolish image of this person about to walk over a cliff, what if I show a soul incarnating and coming down this energy spiral to the earth? And that was I feel like that was my full experience, because I was learning Procreate, I was learning
Mhm.
Apple products because I was an Android
Yeah.
user, I was learning digital art. It was a lot was like kind of downloading into me at the time, but I feel like it set me up to continue on and get deeper into the journey. So
Oh, amazing. And I noticed that I made a little list actually of the different cards that you had renamed because I absolutely love, and I was going to ask you about that process actually, because like the Fool as um, incarnation is incredible. I love that
thank you.
process. Like you said, I feel like the Fool card, yeah, like who wants to be foolish? Like I tend to resist it a little bit because I'm like, yeah, I'm starting something new, but I mean, there is that kind of leap of faith aspect of it, but I don't think you're always going in blind. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Mhm.
or without seeing what you're doing. It's like there's that faith element. But I love that incarnation idea because it just encapsulates that idea of starting fresh and starting new. But there's that, yeah, that sense of coming down into yourself in a
Mhm.
new way that is really, really beautiful. I
And I
love
felt
it.
like I was incarnating like as an artist, because even
Mm,
up to like very recently, I didn't call myself an artist, because it just
hmm.
I felt like a liar. I felt like an
Yeah.
imposter, because I was just like, I'm just learning this stuff. But
Yeah.
I had to kind of accept, like, no, when you started this project, you incarnated into an evolution of you. You're still all the aspects of you that you were before, but you've added on to it, and this is like a new birth, a
Yeah.
new you. I don't know how else to say it, but you're right.
Yeah.
It was a lot. And I think you were
Yeah.
asking about like the process of renaming the cards, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I've renamed a few of them. I know,
Yeah.
like,
The
so.
the list that I had here, or you can go ahead with it if you want. I made a list because I wanted to just stay on track with myself. So yeah, I was interested in the Hierophant. It's the griot. Am I pronouncing that
Bria.
proper? Griot. Oh, that's really, really cool. So tell me about that one.
So that's actually one of my favorite renames. That one and the rename for the devil. But
Nice. Yeah, I love that one too. That's
thank
amazing.
you.
Amazing.
So anytime I start on a card, which really I'm kind of past that. Well, I'll be back on that phase when I'm on the court cards. But
Yeah.
when I was working on the world, anytime I would start a new card, um, I would just kind of ask myself, what does this mean to me? Think about the traditional meanings, but as a woman who incarnated in an African American body, in this time, how does this card reflect in my life?
Hmm.
And if I was working on a card where the meaning was either a little too overtly religious,
Hmm.
or patriarchal, or like oppressive from the sense
Hmm.
of like just history of people of color,
Hmm.
then I would say, this is my deck. I've got the right to name these cards whatever I want to.
Yeah.
And if I chose to rename it, it was typically with all of that in mind, like trying to make it either the meaning clearer, less overtly religious, or more empowering to folks of color. So
Hmm.
when I got to the Hierophant, I thought about the meaning, and um, I think the traditional meaning of that card still fits, but I
Hmm.
wanted to modernize it a little bit as well. And so I started researching what, well, first I asked myself, what is a modern representation of someone who holds a lot of influence, whose words can inspire or devastate, and
Hmm.
how can what person or role um, in the Black community would that be applicable to? And I thought about church and music, and how music is really important to a lot of different cultures in the diaspora. And how that's very closely tied with our spiritual experiences. So I said, okay, what's a modern interpretation? And I thought of rap music, how we used it to tell stories, and still do, and to relay our struggles and our hopes. And music can encompass everything. So I said, okay, rap, that kind of has something like connected to the music and the spiritual aspect, but also the power and the influence of like the celebrity status. And so then I started on this rabbit hole of, where did rap come from? And I found this role, this traditional role in a lot of West African countries, called a griot. And essentially the griot is the story keeper of like a tribe. They will write songs and poems and use that to like orally relay traditions and important moments in history, births and deaths of important or notable figures. And so when I found that out, I was like, okay, well, rappers are sort of like modern day griots. And this is like where it came from, you know, this storytelling and record keeping through song. And as I was researching griots, I found that they often play this stringed instrument called a kora. And I looked up some kora music, and when I say I felt like my body was vibrating, I was like, okay, I think my ancestors are dancing right now, because like I feel like I've been missing this sound my entire life and I didn't know. And I was so moved by it, and just the spiritual like effect it had on me, that I said, okay, instead of you know, Pope, like, you know, a Catholic figure, I'm going to put a griot in this place. And so I named it the griot, and I depicted, or tried to depict, the rapper Common like in concert. So he's like sitting up on this block, and his shirt has the triple crown from the Hierophant, and there's like the two supplicants, but they're really concert goers, and in front of him I drew a kora. So it connects to the original Hierophant, but it's modernized and updated and put in context for members of the African diaspora, or just anyone who is looking for an expanded understanding of the card. That was like the thinking behind that. So that was pretty cool.
No, I love that card, and what you said about the storytelling aspect. Like, I think that's definitely an aspect of the Hierophant, and putting it within the context of rap as a form of communication and storytelling and supportive community. Like that is amazing to me, and I love how you've articulated it and put it into the context of something that makes sense now, because I find with a lot of Hierophant cards, and it's traditionally a card I've struggled with a lot, actually, as someone who doesn't come from a religious background, and it's often kind of put in that context. And I think taking it out of that and putting it into a context that makes sense to you opens up that possibility for everyone else too, right? Because you're looking at it in a way that still resonates with the original meaning, but it creates something new and fresh and more accessible, I feel, than a lot of the original depictions. Like even a lot of the more progressive and inclusive decks that I have, it's still a pretty traditional Hierophant depiction. And I always feel, I understand it, but I always feel slightly disappointed, because I'm just like, it's still that, you know what I mean? And it can be that, but there's so much more to that card and to the understanding of it, right? And I love how you've reworked it. That's awesome. And I love that it gave you a connection to a form of music that really resonated, and all of that, like that kind of ancestral lineage playing in adds more potency and power to that card too. And I often feel that when I write something I feel really good about, it's not just coming from me, there's something else that's almost coming through me. I feel like that would
it's feeding you or something.
And that whole giving yourself permission to just kind of doodle and play, I feel like that shuts down. I too have an inner mean girl that runs rampant. I mean, she is nasty. And
I think it's because we're both Geminis. It's a Gemini.
Oh, yes, exactly. And also that duality of like the analytical and the creative. Like I feel like that's 100% part of that. But when I was working on the logo and when I was working on my tattoo design, I wasn't working on it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I was doodling and I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't invested in it, had to look a certain way or whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ended up coming up was something I really liked, you know? So I think there's a lot of power in that. And I love that you shared that process with me because that's very empowering.
Thank you.
You mentioned the devil card, and that was another one that yeah, again, it's the analytical side. I've got my list here because
I'm
I'm
so
like, I'm
glad
gonna
you
forget if I
did.
don't, you know, blah, blah, blah. And you know your cards way better than I ever will. So, yeah, but, yeah, I wanted to keep myself on track. But the devil card, tell me more about that because I love your depiction of it and
Thank
the
you.
new name and like everything. It's awesome. So good.
So, okay, that's literally one of my favorite cards, and it's so naughty. I feel like so like
Ah, but
cheeky
that's
when I
part of
talk
the
about it,
devil,
but
right?
like
Like that's
I
such a
just
huge
love
part of it. Like,
it.
yeah,
Thank you.
that's great.
So, with that one, I think the most important thing to me was changing the name
Yeah,
because it was overtly religious.
yeah.
And I don't know if I mentioned, but I was raised Christian
Mhm.
before I was an atheist.
Yeah.
Um, and part of how I even became an atheist was the fact that even in small young childhood, like 5, 6 years old, I would have very critical questions about the doctrine I
Mhm.
was being taught. And anytime something was self-contradictory or disempowering,
Yeah.
if I questioned that, it was often responded to with like, oh, you need faith, God has a
Yeah.
plan,
Yeah.
we can't understand his ways, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And the
But I
devil
want
was
to.
always, yeah, exactly. And to me, the devil was always used like a scapegoat, you know, like if I was acting up as a kid like all kids do, oh, is the devil in you, you know, just I
Yeah. That'll
really
make me do it.
hated this notion that we all have free will, but we can be corrupted by the devil, but God knows everything in advance, so but he's not complicit in your bad, like it just, I
Yeah.
really hated that.
Yeah.
But I do think that part of being human is having a darker nature, having hedonistic desires, and
Yeah.
learning where that line is of going too far versus
Yeah.
giving yourself something that you need and being honest about admitting it. And so I knew I was going to change the name, but I wanted it to reflect the concept that there's no evil mystery boogeyman outside of you
Yeah.
that can force you to do anything, because I do believe in, you know, non-physical entities and things like that,
Yeah.
but we're not puppets, we do have free will. So if we do give into those baser natures or something like that, we
Mm.
might have been induced into doing it, but the choice was still ours.
Yeah.
So that was how the name inducement came to me.
Yeah.
And I had seen people talk about the devil and how it's associated with sex, just in like a very neutral way, um,
Hmm.
and I didn't want such a loaded word like the devil to be associated with
Yeah.
sex, because I think sex is natural, normal, healthy, you know, it's part
Mm.
of adult life. And it's
Yeah.
not something to shy away from. Like, we're sexual
Yeah.
beings. That's how we're all on this planet. So
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to depict something that was sort of sexy in nature, but
Yeah.
still kind of makes you ask questions like, what are these elf-eared naked people doing behind this
Yeah.
woman in straps and leather, and she's holding a swing and she's got a blunt in her hand? And it was just,
Yeah.
I wanted people to see the image and like understand, okay, this is
Yeah.
a serious card, but at the
Yeah.
same time not make it so unapproachable and scary by calling it
Yeah.
the devil. So
Yeah.
that was like the process with that one. But
Oh, I
I'm
love it.
still so in love with that card.
It's absolutely fabulous. And I think like the devil gets a really bad rap, but I was getting together with my tarot group this week and I pulled the devil card for a friend of mine. And in the context of the reading, it was so different. It wasn't like you need to show restraint, you need to check yourself, you know, you're getting into bad patterns, which are some of the traditional meanings, and that 100% applies a lot of the time. But in the context of her reading, it was like, no, you need to give yourself permission to sex it up. You need to give yourself permission to open up to what are your desires? What are your needs? What can you indulge in right now? And I love that you've included that component as part of the card because there are two sides to every single card in the tarot. Like nothing is black and white. There's all these shades of gray in terms of interpretation. And there are good aspects to the devil as well. You know, if you've been feeling really repressed, if you've been feeling really tamped down, giving yourself permission to open up to these things, embrace your sexuality, embrace your blunt, embrace whatever it is that you need at this point in time. And I think so many of us are so repressed a lot of the time based on how we're socialized and how our culture is structured, especially as women. Having that inducement to open up and to embrace that aspect of ourselves and embrace that aspect of our experience is so powerful. And I love that it's such an empowering card.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, like I was just looking, because I did a review of all of the cards that you posted this morning, just so it was all fresh in my mind for this. And I was just like, that's a really special devil card. Like I find in most tarot decks, there's like one or two cards that just like really, really speak to me. And that was 100% one of them. And I don't often say that about the devil cards. So I was super impressed. That's amazing. So, and the other one that I noticed that I was really intrigued by and wanted to ask you about was the tower and the fall aspect of that. Because that's a unique perspective, and I love it. I mean,
I'm so
most
happy
tarot
you
cards
asked about
the
that.
fall off the tower. That's kind of a traditional representation. But okay, I'm going to start rambling. Stop rambling and let you take it.
No, you're fine. No, I'm so happy you asked about that one because it was actually inspired by the tower in the Bonefire Tarot. So I'm trying to find it really quickly. As far as the depiction and the name, the tower itself, like as a name, when I first was reading tarot, came off quite neutral to me. The name itself didn't really pack much of a punch. Obviously, the image does, but the name, I felt like, you know, if you're very new to tarot or new to getting tarot readings done by a tarot reader, if someone says, "Oh, you've got the tower here," it can be a little difficult to kind of conceptualize exactly what that means off the bat. And the noble aspect, the fact that they're like depicted as like royalty falling out of the tower, was something I kind of struggled with because, you know, I live in America. We don't have royals here. Like that's just not a thing. And I think I skipped the tower somewhere in my deck, but that's just not a thing. And so I kept asking myself, like, what would be a modern equivalent to a royal couple falling out of their castle tower? And so I found a picture of like this sort of swanky waterfront loft, and I thought, okay, whoever can afford this is basically a modern day royal.
Yes,
absolutely. And the tower in the Rider-Waite is like, I don't know if you can see the water very much, but I think the tower itself, it's like surrounded by water. So the fact that the property was waterfront, I felt like was a really good fit. And the meaning of the tower to me is sort of, it's almost like a fall from grace, but it's like spirit is stripping away these structures that you've gotten used to and that you think keep you safe. And what's something that we often hear from affluent people with a little bit of a lack of empathy, you know, like, oh, you know, I don't want people coming into my neighborhood bringing the unsavory element. I don't want, you know, these criminals here, that type of thing. So I thought about how when you are able to live in a certain amount of luxury, how you feel safe and insulated from things that are totally natural and a part of just human life, such as sudden loss. And so when I kept dwelling on this notion of it being a fall from grace, I just decided, okay, I think the fall is a good enough name to kind of capture what I want this card to be. And I drew the couple. Okay, here's the tower card from the Bonefire Tarot. I drew the couple on my tower falling kind of off of their roof. I imagined they were having some sort of like swanky rooftop party, and all of a sudden these lightning rods, not rods, but these strikes of lightning just come down, set everything on fire. They're shocked. They fall back, and it's like you were up at this beautiful, luxurious party with probably other well-to-do folks, and you couldn't escape nature, you know? So it just, to me, the tower is like the greatest equalizer among human beings, because it's not even so much about what you have materially, it's about what you're comfortable with and what you feel is the natural structure. And when spirit comes in to knock that over, it's jarring to anybody having to go back to their foundations.
Yeah.
So that was like the thinking behind it. And this is the Bonefire Tower card.
Amazing.
So I
Oh, I
loved
love that.
this because there's this tower here, like a spire on a
Yeah.
castle. You see just the feet and legs of the figure falling down,
Uh-huh.
but you see this bell, this lightning rod,
Yep.
this beautiful purple crown,
Yep.
these playing cards. And in the guidebook, she like breaks down every single symbol on here.
Oh,
And
amazing.
I loved that we were seeing into the tower a little bit on
Mhm.
this one. And so that was like really what made me start looking for pictures to reference like a swanky kind of upscale living
Mhm.
space, because
Yeah.
the fact that we could see into that tower was just really inspiring to me, and I wanted to kind of bring that into mine. So that
Yeah.
was like the thinking there.
Oh, I love it so much. And I love one of the things I meant to mention earlier and I didn't was I love how vibrantly colored all of your cards are. Like there's such vibrancy in terms of the tones and the color combinations that you've chosen to use. And I find myself drawn to the illustrations so much like with that deck. The saturation of color just
Mhm.
draws you into the image and really in a really inviting way. So I just wanted to mention that as an aside. But I love what you said because I feel like, sorry, my dog's whining outside the door. I'll just go grab him. But the tower is so much about shaking you out of your comfort zone, right? It's like you've gotten almost complacent,
Mhm.
and then the thing needs to come to shift you out, move you into a new aspect of your life or understanding, or move you in a new direction. And there's so much power to that. And I love that whole idea of the fall because that's so much a part of that process. Just one sec, because he's
Thank you.
whining, driving me nuts.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah, so this is Pippin. He's
Hi. He's so cute.
he's very entitled. He feels like he should be. Well, he's my pup, so he wants to be with me at all times, on my lap if possible. But he doesn't like closed doors because he wants to have access to all the people all the time. And
Mhm.
actually, our kitten's just sleeping on the closet shelf right now too. So surrounded in her fur babies. Yeah. So, what were some of the other cards that you renamed, and what was your motivation for that?
So I renamed Judgment. I renamed it Ascension,
Mm-hmm.
mainly because the gray naked dead people reaching for Raphael, it just
Yeah.
never
No.
resonated with me.
Me
I was
neither.
just, again, that was very overtly religious.
Mm-hmm.
And when I learned the meaning of the card, I honestly didn't see it in
Mm-hmm.
Pixie Smith's depiction. I love the Rider Waite, but
Yeah.
I didn't see cyclical internal review before up leveling in
Yeah.
the picture itself.
Yeah.
And there's this deck, oh gosh, it's called the Afro Goddess Tarot Arcanas. And
Ooh.
the Judgment card in that deck is beautiful. I mean,
Oh.
the colors, they're beautiful. And the depiction, there's a woman walking up a staircase and there's a large angel above her, but they're blowing like a horn,
Oh,
like a
nice.
curved horn.
Yeah.
And just something about the staircase always stuck with me
Mm-hmm.
because I liked that she was going up.
Yeah.
And to me, Judgment is about internal review that's on a cycle.
Yeah.
Before we can evolve as individual creatures and
Mm-hmm.
get to like the next phase of life, we
Yeah.
have to look at ourselves and say, like, what do I need to forgive myself for? What do I need to be
Yeah.
honest with myself about? And cycle and reflection just were keywords that kept
Mm-hmm.
bouncing on my head when I was working on like coming up with the concept.
Yeah.
And so I decided the best depiction would be a spiral staircase to indicate going up, like that staircase that inspired
Mm-hmm.
me, but also in a cycle, you know, like you're
Yeah.
going to get to the same point but at a higher level where you need
Yeah.
to review again. And reflection, it just made me think of mirrors. So
Mm-hmm.
I decided to depict a woman going up this spiral staircase with one mirror lower on the stairs, like behind her, where you could see that's the back of the mirror. That's not the reflective surface.
Yeah.
So in theory, she's already confronted that challenge and integrated that lesson that reflection brought to her, and she got a little bit higher on the staircase and another mirror appeared because now it's time to review again. And
Yeah.
coming from the top, there's these bright beams of light to kind of harken to like that divine aspect of the angel on the Rider Waite without it being so in your face, overtly Christian, religious.
Yeah.
Because I think we can all kind of, even from a scientific perspective, respect the fact that without light, life wouldn't be possible. Before we even get into carbon and water and air and all that other stuff, life as we know it wouldn't be a thing without light. So that was kind of magical and divine to me. And I felt like as she's going up these stairs, looking at these reflections in this mirror, maybe facing things that she wouldn't want to see, but she needs to, she's getting closer and closer to that divine light to bring it into herself. So I felt like rather than judging herself, she's just in the process of ascending. And that was why I renamed it Ascension.
I love that so much. It's funny because when you look at the word judgment, on a core level, it means that you're judging something, whether you're judging yourself or judging someone else. But I pulled the judgment card from my card last year for 2020. It was fitting. But the more I worked with the meaning of that card, the less it seemed to be about judgment to me. It was more about up-leveling and evolution and expansion and ascension. It was about, you know, facing up to the things and working through them and reaching a new level of understanding of yourself, of the world around you. And so when I saw that you renamed it Ascension, I was just like, yes, that makes so much sense, because it's so in line with the relationship that I developed with that card over the course of kind of working with it more intensely. And I know it's a card that a lot of people struggle with too. And I think a lot of it has to do with that traditional depiction and the ways in which that word functions in our understanding, because I feel like in our society, it's like you don't want to be that judgmental person. You know, you don't want to judge things. You want to have a more fair and balanced view, or at least that's how I see it. And so, yeah, finding that new name for it makes a lot of sense to me, and I was so excited to see it. And the image is just beautiful. And now I love your work of mirrors and reflection, because so much of that card is about introspection and reflection and really integrating those lessons and then moving on to another level of understanding. So that's awesome. That whole spiral staircase makes so much sense to me too, and what you said about cycles too, because so much about tarot and actually astrology too, I feel like so much of it has to do with cycles and patterns and moving through things and the whole journey. I mean, the Fool to the World card, it's all about evolution and journey, and then you restart all over again. It's not like you're done once you hit the World. It means you get to start all over again, right? So that whole idea is just really magical. I love that. Oh, that's awesome.
And I know you didn't ask about it, but kind of just to like continue on that story, if you look at the World card in the bottom left corner, because she's like standing kind of up on this flat platform, and I tried to make it look like it's made of the same material as the staircase, and in that bottom right corner you can see there's some stairs where she got up to the top of that platform. So it's kind of like she was like the continuation from the woman in Ascension, doing this cyclical review and leveling up and evolution, and then in the World she's at the top. So like even visually I try to have some type of continuity between the cards, even if I didn't rename them. And Ascension, I felt like helped differentiate it between justice, because when I was new to tarot, judgment and justice, the words themselves just kind of rang similar in my head. And it kind of confused me. So I wanted to make it so that anybody else who might get that Afro Drip tarot would have an easier time differentiating the meanings of the cards just based on what the picture is and what they're named. So
yeah, absolutely. I love that. I noticed also one of the other ones that you had renamed was the Chariot as the Ride, which encapsulates the meaning beautifully. Like, what was your process with that? Because I know that you were talking about the Chariot earlier and what significance it had when you first started your tarot journey, and I was kind of thinking about that in the back of my head, and yeah, wondering what your process was with that.
So the Chariot is to this day still one of my favorite cards in
Mhm.
general, just whatever tarot deck. If I see the
Yeah.
Chariot, I'm like, spirits here. But the meaning of that card to me is almost like paradoxical, because I look at it like, if you pull the Chariot, it's like just short of a guarantee of success.
Hmm.
It's saying that if you are able to stay focused and rein in the opposing parts of yourselves, as represented by the Sphinxes or the two dogs
Hmm.
on my card, um, it's okay to understand and accept that one part of you may feel one way about this goal and another
Hmm.
part may feel a different way. But if you really want it, you don't need to try to win over or beat or defeat the part of you that disagrees. You have to get it to work with you. You have to rein them in and continue focused on that path. So the name The Chariot to me always put the focus on the vehicle itself,
Yeah.
um, which is fine. I don't have a problem
Hmm.
with that. But because the card in my mind just is associated with a much longer term journey and maintaining focus,
Hmm.
I kind of wanted to have a name that would do both, refer
Yeah.
to the vehicle or the tools that you're using to carry you to your goal, but
Mhm.
also the time it takes to get there, the journey that you're traveling.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be something that like rang in the ears of like people of color as like coming from our vernacular.
Yeah.
And ride is used to refer to cars themselves, but it's also used to refer to like the actual trip you're going on, like come on this ride with me real quick.
Yeah.
So I felt like that double entendre helped to kind of honor the original
Yeah.
title in The Chariot, because it was referring to the vehicle, not the charioteer,
Mhm.
but also kind of modernize it in just the word itself, and also the double meaning of being the vehicle, but also the journey that you're going on.
Yeah.
So that was like what I wanted to do there.
I love that so much because, yeah, you're absolutely right. The chariot is something that's carrying you forward, but so much of that card has to do with the journey itself and your own personal motivation. And so that really captures that beautifully. I love that so much.
Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah. And then I think correct me if I'm wrong, but the last change that you made was inversion for the hanged one, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So I love, again, inversion is such a great articulation of that particular card. So tell me more about your process of shifting that.
um well, hanged in and of itself, the word always made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
In America, there's the history of lynching,
Yeah.
and like even going back to the griot, like we've put that pain in songs. Like there's this old song
Mhm.
called "Strange Fruit," which
Yeah.
is about peaches grown in Georgia, in a certain area where people know not to go and eat those peaches because
Mhm.
underneath was a mass slave grave of slaves that had been murdered. So
Yeah.
that fruit that looked really succulent and tempting was uh, nourished with something
Oh,
really abhorrent and horrible.
yeah.
Um, so I didn't want hanged anything. I've seen
No.
where decks will rename it, the hanged woman or the hanged one. The word hanged makes me uncomfortable, and I think rightfully so.
Yeah.
Um, and I just didn't want that to trigger me or anyone who might purchase the deck in the future.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's a very important card, and the perspective aspect of it, intentionally hanging upside down with very relaxed body posture,
Hmm.
to release, to surrender, to let go, to prepare for the upcoming metamorphosis of the death card. Um, for me, it was really about the perspective and about the intentional shifting of where you are looking at this situation from.
Hmm.
And so I just kind of looked up like synonyms for upside down,
Hmm.
and inversion kept coming up as like a yoga method. People use inversion for back pain. Some people
Yeah.
even will invert for hair growth and do like scalp massages upside down. And so the word inversion to me had um, more intention behind it. Like if
Hmm.
someone has inverted themselves, they didn't fall, they weren't pushed, they weren't
Hmm.
put in that position, they did it,
Hmm.
and it's for a reason. um,
Hmm.
so I named it inversion to show the intention behind it, because the hanged man, even removing the historical implications for black
Yeah.
people, sounds like it was something was done to that person.
Yeah.
And I know there are some very old decks where that card is called like the martyr or something, or like the traitor.
Yeah.
And I just really wanted to remove any of those connotations because those meanings just don't resonate for me.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make the word more approachable, more accessible from my
Yeah.
perspective as an African American. So inversion to me seemed more empowered than the
Yeah.
hanged person. So
Oh, I love that so much. And it makes so much sense. And I feel like with the hanged one, uh, there's a sense of negativity around that. I mean, the word is not a positive one in any context. And I feel like there's a lot of positives to be had by that, with that card and that whole process. It's like with the devil, it's not uniquely or wholly bad or wholly good. There's that gray area in between, depending on the context of your reading or the context of where you're coming from. And there's a period of kind of evolution and introspection and a forced pause, perhaps, but it's a necessary one, and it's for your own growth and evolution. So that whole idea of inversion as a very mindful and empowered approach resonates so deeply. Like that's one of the most bang on interpretations of that card that I've honestly heard. It makes so much sense to me.
thank you.
I love it. Like I'm fangirling here for a moment, but I'm so in awe of this deck and all the work that you've put into it, and I've so enjoyed the videos that you've created. I said that I think before you hopped onto the call about how on your Instagram there's all of the drawing videos that you've done to show the process of putting everything together, and I'm so fascinated by that, and I've been enjoying them so much. And then seeing the final product and the different phases that you went through to create it has been absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love it so much.
I still get so nervous when I'm about to post one of those things, just because,
Yeah.
like, if you've followed, you know, my sketches start really rough. Like
Yeah.
I think sometimes, like, I sketch so rough, I'm the only one who can look at it and be like, okay, that's a person sitting there doing this. But I do that partially because I want anyone who is interested in that Afro drip to feel like they're a part of the process, because I feel like it brings you in, even if you're not drawing with me. The fact that you can see, like you said, the evolutions of the cards, I think just makes people feel a lot more involved. But the second reason is kind of goes back to when I first started posting the art, when I had no intentions of selling it. I wanted other people who wanted to get back into art as an older person to see, like, if I can do it, you can do it. I hadn't drawn or sketched anything for like years when I put myself on that year study period. But I like the art I make now. You know, I definitely feel like there's room for improvement in a lot of areas, but I think getting to the point where it was like, I like what I'm making was so, it felt like such a revelation to feel like I can say that. I can say, yes, I made this and I'm proud of it and I like it. And by showing the, especially like the speed paints where you can see like every stroke that I've made sped up really quickly. Those were the types of videos that inspired me back when I was still kind of like waiting for some unnamed person to make my unicorn deck. Seeing other artists show like how really rough a sketch can start and how mesmerizing the finished piece can be, so it just made me say, I want to do that. And when I first started posting, I wanted to be that inspiration for other folks, because I think art is such, it's so like almost downplayed how therapeutic and important art can be. Even if you don't want to monetize your creations, making something, whether it be a cross stitch or a doodle or whatever, is so nourishing to the soul. And I just kind of wanted those videos to help someone else realize, like, you can nourish your soul in the same way. So it's really moving to me to hear you say like how much you've enjoyed them, because that just makes me feel like I'm not a crazy person, and I like did what I set out to do.
Yeah, well, and first of all, your rough sketches are absolutely stunning. And second of all, I feel like with Instagram, there's this like pressure that everything has to be like Instagram perfect. And I always feel so reassured and so inspired when I see someone's first steps into something, whether it's a rough sketch or it's an unguarded moment where your hair is flying everywhere and things are not perfect and the dog's barking and there's laundry all over the place, you know, like it's, it's so wonderful to see things at all stages of the process, because it's hugely inspiring when you see where something starts from as opposed to where it goes to. I mean, it's definitely given me a lot of inspiration to start doodling again and to start kind of accessing my practice, because you're right, drawing is so therapeutic, and when you're not invested in a particular outcome, you have the freedom to let it just be what it is, right? And I am a writer. Writing has been my art for years, and my husband always gives me a hard time because he's like, you're comparing your shitty first draft, excuse the language, with someone's polished final product. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, you need to give yourself permission to have multiple shitty first drafts
Mm-hmm.
and multiple kind of evolutions of this process, like this perfectionist tendency that I have that makes me want to have it be like the thing right out
Mm-hmm.
the gate, and it's just not going to be, right? So it's always reassuring to see that process. That's amazing. um, so, and I noticed with your minor arcana too, with the wands, they're now scepters and the cups are vessels. So my first question is, how did you choose your new names for those suits? Because they're awesome. And second of all, what are your new names, if any, for swords and pentacles, or are you going to keep them the way they are? I'm so curious.
Um, Thank you for asking that. So, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about when I was renaming some of the majors, how if it felt overtly like patriarchal or just like too far removed from indigenous cultures or something, then I wanted to kind of modernize it and bring it back down
Mhm.
to like a more approachable level. And I never had an issue with wands as the name
Mhm.
of the suit. Um, but I feel like for anyone new to tarot, especially if you're coming from like a atheist, agnostic, secular kind of mind frame,
Mhm.
the term wands can kind of throw you because we think of like magicians and waving,
Harry
a
Potter.
stick of wood and Harry Potter and that type of thing. Um, and I think the wands are that whole suit to me. The fire element is about intention, will, and power, right?
Mhm.
And so I wanted to name the suit something that would still, for some people, kind of make them think of a stick of wood, just
Mhm.
because I wanted to honor the roots of the fact that I was drawing from the Rider Waite Smith. But I
Yeah.
wanted the suit name to kind of evoke a sense of will and power itself.
Mhm.
And to me, a scepter is something that an everyday person isn't going to just use as a walking stick. A
Yeah.
scepter is something that has been crafted
Mhm.
for a purpose, for someone's presence,
Mhm.
for them to sort of demonstrate and emanate their power, even maybe before they've taken action. Like,
Yeah.
those people, they enter a room and it's just like, even if they don't say anything, all the eyes kind of turn to them, like
Yeah.
wondering, what's this magnetic energy I feel?
Yeah.
That was kind of like the thinking behind scepters. I just felt like it was related enough to wands because you could have a scepter made out of wood, and they can be like kindling and stuff for flames, the element fire.
Yeah.
But someone who wields a scepter to me is really good at directing their willpower, at
Mhm.
taking action, at
Mhm.
inspire. So, oh, sorry, I don't know if I cut out, but um, scepter to me just fit what the suit was about.
Yeah.
And the suit of cups, um, what I thought about leaving cups as the suit name, um, but because that's the water element suit, and water is all about intuition and emotion and relationships and emotional intelligence. I thought of like
I think it's maybe cutting out a little bit. I'll just give it a second here. I thought, there we go. Okay.
I'm so sorry. I don't know
Oh
what
my gosh,
happened.
no worries, no worries. I wasn't sure whether to hold tight or to go off and come back on again, but it worked out, so that's
Yay.
perfect.
Um,
Yay.
so I think I was talking about cups, and
Yeah.
when I thought about like water and how it's a very it's something that takes the shape of the container that it's in,
Mhm.
and I don't know, something about that just really resonated with me. And when I was working on The Magician and I had to come up with the suit icons, I
Yeah.
was sort of looking for something inspired by African culture that would still serve as a cup, but
Mhm.
sort of just visually give, like, put you in the mindset of like native indigenous cultures of
Mhm.
color and how we work with the
Yeah.
elements. And I thought of like the clay pottery that's very much utilized throughout more rural areas in Africa and like indigenous cultures in general.
Mhm.
Clay pots and clay sculptures and things have played a huge role, like even to the point where like certain ceremonial pots would hold bones of loved ones and things like that.
Yep.
Um, so the shape was sort of designed by those clay pots that I kept seeing.
Yeah.
And I chose to make them gold just because the cups in Rider Waite are gold. But
Yeah.
also gold is like super abundant in Africa. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I think I can do this shape. So they're not
Mhm.
quite the same as the Rider Waite cups. And I think calling them vessels would more strongly indicate that this is the water suit. So
Yeah.
vessels was really just to kind of bring in the fact that we are containers for
Mhm.
our water power, our
Mhm.
relationships, emotions, and intuition. So that was the
Yeah.
thinking there. Swords are going to be blades, and pentacles are going to be coins. So
Oh, I love that.
um, all four suits are going to be changed, and I am going to
Yeah.
rename the court cards, but I'm not all the way certain on what they're going to be. I'm pretty certain pages are going to be students.
Yeah.
Um, for the knights, I'm going back and forth. I really
Yeah.
am leaning towards zealot, which
Ooh.
sort of has a negative connotation, but I think of zeal or zealousness
Mhm.
as being sort of like neutral. It's
Yeah.
extreme passion about something. And
Yeah.
when I was learning tarot, I came across a website that described the Knights of the Tarot as the extremists. And that
Mhm.
always just kind of resonated with me.
Mhm.
And so I thought, I don't want to name it the extremist of blades because that sounds like a serial killer. But like, if I say, the zealot of coins or something like that, I
Yeah.
feel like I could explain why I feel like the knights are very zealous with the energies of their suit and how
Yeah.
it can be in light or shadow. And I
Yeah.
think for queens, I'm pretty certain I'm going to have that rank be mentor. And then for kings,
Oh, I
that
love
rank
it.
is going to be master. But I want to have like
Okay.
some gender bending going on there
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I don't like how the second highest rank is the female one,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the highest one is always males.
Yep.
So there's going to be two female masters, and there's going to be two male mentors. I just haven't
Oh, I
quite
love it.
decided what suit that's going to be, but they're going
I
to be
I love
changed
that
too.
so much. That's amazing. Yeah, I have a deck. I think it's the yeah, it's the Liminal 11 the what I've got my cloth
The
up.
Everyday Witch Tarot?
No, it's their
No.
other one.
Oh, I don't
The
know what
starts
their
with
other
an
one.
L. Why am I blanking? My brain is Swiss cheese right now. I've been using it a lot over the last month. Why am I blanking on the
Is
name?
it
Anyway.
is it This Might Hurt, or is that someone?
No,
No.
that's
Okay.
Isabel Rotman. It's the Luna Soul. There we go.
Oh,
If I
yes, yes,
can.
yes. I know that deck.
Yeah, and I love it. And I also love the fact that the kings come before the queens
Mm-hmm.
because that hierarchy drives me batty as well because I just don't understand. Like there's a whole patriarchal, hierarchical thing to do with that
Mm-hmm.
I don't appreciate as a woman, as a person. And I love that that's been reversed, even just in the guidebook. And we actually just ordered, I think it's called Queenie. It's a playing card deck that I found with my kids on Indiegogo. And it's amazing because they've completely taken off that kings and queens hierarchy and put them on the same level. And
Nice.
It's awesome. And there's people of color represented in that deck, and it kind of takes gender and throws it on its head. And the illustrations are lovely. And it was actually a young girl that came up with the idea and created it with her dad. And I just love that whole process.
Yeah,
But
awesome.
in terms of the tarot community and inclusivity, I think that the more decks kind of take that gender binary and turn it on its head, the happier it makes me, at least, because I feel like things get so polarized that way. And yeah, that just makes me really excited that you're looking at doing that, because I think it's really great and fantastic. And yeah, I love the scepters as the wands, because as you said, there's something so empowering about that, like taking something that is a symbol of power and a symbol of strength and a symbol of inspiration and motivation, and having that be at the core of wands. Because wands, I mean, yeah, there's the magician thing, and then there's a stick that you pick up on the ground, but a scepter that like takes it up to the next level, you know. I love that. And vessel, like that, I don't know about you, but when I think of cups and I think about emotions, it's like this holding space, this incubation space for all of those feelings and all of that water and that fluidity.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that vessels adds that holding element to that particular suit. It's really quite magical.
Thank you.
I love that. I'm so excited. And I love the zealot for the knight, because the knights are nothing if not impetuous and forward momentum and moving, and I feel like that word so perfectly encapsulates that whole energy and momentum that all of the knights have. Yeah, that's awesome. So I wanted to ask you too, I know you'd posted a little while ago about the card finish and floating borders as a possibility for the deck. So where are you at with that right now, and what are your thoughts? And yeah.
I can actually show you. Give me 1 second.
Ooh, exciting. So awesome.
So I sort of jumped the gun, and I'm somebody, if there's like a very multi-step, long-term involved project, I have to have the bird's eye view and the details before I feel like I can really move forward. And so I went ahead and started contacting card manufacturers like months ago, even though I wasn't anywhere near close finished with the art, but I needed to understand what was possible. And there were certain elements from different decks that I owned that I really kind of wanted to bring together in that Afro Drip. And I mentioned the first deck I ever bought was the Golden Thread Tarot. That one has plastic cardstock, and it shuffles like a dream. And I think most people really like the gold gilding that a lot of indie decks come with. So that was a must for me. But I really wanted to find a manufacturer that could do plastic cardstock with gilded edges. And that was difficult because a lot of people said, oh, we can do gilded edges, but it can't be on plastic, or, you know, vice versa. And I did eventually find a manufacturer that said, yeah, we can gild plastic cards. And so I kind of took it up a notch, and I said, well, do you have like frosted transparent plastic? And they were like, yep, we do. And we can gild that too. So the cards have been designed with what I've been calling a floating border, just because I haven't seen it on a tarot deck. But essentially there's going to be a 1/4 inch going around the card that will be see-through, that you'll be able to see like reading mat or whatever you have the card sitting on, kind of showing up around that art. But then because of that gilded edge, it almost looks like that colored space, the actual art itself, is floating in that, like in between the gold, if that makes sense.
Oh, I love that.
The manufacturer that I went with sent me like these playing cards. They've got the frosted plastic. You can't see, this is the back of the card. You can't see through to the design on the other side. But if you were to like actually put it up against something, you can still see that. So this is the cardstock that it's going to be printed on. And I just love that it's going to be waterproof and durable and still have that shiny gold edge. And I'm so giddy to actually finish all the cards and get the deck itself printed, because I just think it's going to be really unique and stand out. Even amongst indie decks, I really wanted that Afro Drip Tarot to be distinct, you know, and because it's already got the bright, vibrant, saturated colors and the updated imagery. And I think, you know, a lot of people are interested in it, but I wanted it to be where it's not just the art, but even the physical build of the deck is considered and thought about the fact that these are, going to be shuffled and dealt
Yeah.
with a lot.
Yeah.
So I wanted it to be something that would be durable and beautiful and unique. And
Yeah.
that was like what I came up with.
Oh, I love that so much. Like, I am in awe of the detail that you've put into this. Like, I mean, by that I mean how you've looked at every single aspect of these cards and all of the details when it comes to the edging and the bordering and the finish of the cards and the shuffleability and the different, I mean, aspects of each of the illustrations themselves. But that is so amazing. Oh my gosh. So
Thank
what
you.
kind of box are you looking at? And I know that you had another post about digital versus physical guidebooks. So where are you at with those things right now? I'm curious.
So I have decided to go with a physical guidebook. That's like where my quote is right now
Yeah.
with the manufacturer that I've picked. Um,
Yeah.
it could change in the future if like, because I still have 36 cards to finish.
Yeah.
So still going to be a little bit before I can like launch.
Yeah.
And if the cost of materials goes up in that time, I may have to
Yeah.
readjust and switch to a digital guidebook. But
Yeah.
I've budgeted for a certain amount of dollars, like cost per unit, cost per deck, to be
Yeah.
spent. And I've intentionally made that figure higher than what was quoted to me in case
Yeah.
those material costs do go up in the time, between getting the quote and actually finishing the art.
Mhm.
So the hope is that there will be a physical book included with the deck itself. And the
Yeah.
box design that I'm going with, I'm looking around at like my floating tarot decks to see if there's one I can use as an example. I don't see one, but basically it's going to be one of those boxes that kind of folds over this way magnetically.
Yeah. Oh,
So
I
you'll
love
be able
that.
to lift it up and then take
Yeah.
the deck and the guidebook out.
Oh, awesome.
I wanted something that would be one piece, like I don't mind these type of boxes, like the clamshell
Yeah.
boxes, but I
Yeah.
find that because I have a very short attention span and I get distracted really easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find that when I'm reading, um, reading the cards, sometimes I'll be so focused on getting to the reading itself that I'll kind of toss the box over to the side, and then when I'm ready to put the cards away, I'm like, "Where's the lid? Where's the
What is it to this?
so,
Yeah.
so I wanted people not to have to worry about that. That like if you've got that Afro Drip Tarot, everything you need is contained in there, and it's going to have a very strong magnet and be really secure.
I love
And
that.
I would really love to do some sort of like maybe as an accessory or
Yeah.
something for like the Kickstarter. I would love to do some sort of like elastic band, maybe with like an enamel pin or something on it that
Mm.
people put around their deck
Oh, I love
boxes.
that.
Just because I've had decks where like the magnet was good, but if I throw it in my purse or something, it
Yeah.
might lift up. And I
Next
think
thing you
having
know,
that
you're part
extra
of it.
peace of mind, that security
Yeah.
that like it's magnetically closed, it's in one piece, so I can't
Yeah.
lose the lid, but there's also this cute like
Oh, I
enamel
love that.
elastic thing hanging on it. I think that would be really
Yeah.
cool. So
Oh,
that's
that's
like
fabulous.
what I want to do.
That's an incredible idea. I haven't seen that before, and I feel like it needs to be part of all tarot boxes because I tend to keep boxes because I really like the way they look, and there's usually an aesthetic element to it, and I love that so much. Um, I'm not a huge fan of like tuck boxes, so I have made a bunch of tarot bags for those kinds of decks. And I also feel like if I'm traveling with them, it's really good to have that extra layer of protection because I mean, most decks are pretty, like the boxes are pretty sturdy, but they do come apart if you put them in your bag, right? And so that whole idea of having, and it sounds so stylish too with like the little
Thank
design and
you.
everything. I love that. Well, it's interesting because my next question actually was going to be if you're going to do a Kickstarter campaign. And you'd mentioned Kickstarter, so I'm assuming you are. One of the things that I was thinking about in terms of the physical guidebook, like if material costs do go up and it's not possible to do a physical guidebook, that could be one of your stretch goals.
That's true. Yep, I had thought about that. I think with Kickstarter, there's just so much to think about in advance.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you knew, but originally I had planned to launch the deck next month in August.
Yeah.
And so it's actually kind of cool that we're having this conversation because I get to like put that out there that it's not going to be ready next month. when I picked
I
that
was supposed
date,
to launch my website on Friday, and it didn't happen, and I'm needing to take time, and yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's that thing where like experience is the best teacher and hindsight is 2020,
yeah,
because I had picked the August launch like right at the beginning of 2021, and
yeah,
I thought, that's like 8 months away. I'll have plenty of time to do the art and, start kind of thinking about like, am I going to do a tarot cloth? Am I going to do, any type of other goodies or whatever? And
yeah,
it just it time, I don't want to say time got away from me, but what really ended up happening was I had sort of overestimated how quickly I would be able to finish the cards,
yeah,
because certain cards, it's like you said with writing, I'm a writer too, so I know that feeling of like these words are coming from somewhere else. They're just coming through me. Some
yeah,
cards, it feels the same way. It feels like this image was existing in the ether and spirit chose me to birth it. Like it just comes out and I'm done from sketch to
yeah,
finished painting in like 2.5 days. Other
mm-hmm.
cards, I have a very clear image of what I want, but I get that imposter syndrome, self doubt, or just lack of
Yeah,
inspiration. And it takes me 2 weeks. And
yeah,
that's not even accounting for like just breaks where I'm like, I love
yeah,
to draw, but I need to like get that Four of Swords in and refresh myself.
yep,
Um, and so when I counted up how many cards I had left, I said, okay, even if it only takes me a week to do each of these cards and I take no
yeah,
breaks in between, that doesn't leave me any time to design the box, to write the
yep,
guidebook, to
yeah,
design any enamel pins or bookmarks or postcards or tarot
yeah,
cloths or even like merchandise and apparel that I might want to launch along with this.
yeah,
It's not possible to finish that in
yeah,
a few weeks. So
yeah,
I had to like sort of swallow my pride and like admit to myself, okay, you thought you'd be done, but you're not. It's okay. You gotta wait till next year.
yeah,
But I really want to do it right. I don't want people to give me money to back this deck when I'm barely over halfway finished with the art. It'll probably realistically take me until next year,
yeah,
to get everything done. I hate backing things and then so much time goes by that I forget I backed it and then it comes in the mail and I'm not excited anymore, or I
yeah,
have to get re-excited. I want
yeah,
the experience, for anybody who chooses to support this project to be the best I could possibly give them. And I think that waiting to actually launch and accept funding until everything is ready or as ready as I
yeah,
can get it is the right move to make. So
yeah.
it was going to be out for backing August 9th, but we're looking at 2022 now. So
Yeah. And something that I had to reframe for myself thinking about my website, because I was putting so much pressure on myself to have it done by Friday and all this stuff. And I kind of had to stop and think like, what's the rush? Do you know what I mean? Like I set these lofty goals for myself and I feel like I absolutely need to reach them. I don't know, maybe it's a Gemini thing. And it was interesting what you said about like organizing certain elements like way in advance, because I tend to
mm-hmm,
do that as well. And it's like I need to know that I've gotten certain ducks in a row before I can progress even with the creative part. And that's
mm-hmm,
so interesting to me. But I feel like for me personally, it was like I need to reclaim the joy of this process, because some of it's going to be a sledge because it's a huge project and it's a huge thing to focus on. And I've set all these goals for myself. So there's that sense of if I don't set a finite point, then I'm never going to do it, right? But at least for
mm-hmm,
me, for the process. But then I was like, well, but why am I rushing myself? You know what I mean? Like this is a labor of love as well. And it's something that I
mm-hmm,
want to be doing. And if I'm just rushing to put it out, then I'm not taking the time to enjoy it. Do you know what I mean? And there's that
mm-hmm,
that joy aspect that I think needs to be part of it. And like for me, deadlines are essential, but then it needs to be tempered a little bit by first realistic expectations. I expect to do it all yesterday anyway.
mm-hmm,
And then also that joy aspect, right? Like,
mm-hmm,
and speaking as a 100% potential backer, I'm enjoying watching this process and watching the evolution of the deck. If it takes you 2 years from now, that's great too. Do you know what I mean? Not that it would, but even just being able to follow along with the journey and the evolution and all the different aspects. And I love that you've shared so much of this, whether it's, your ideas about the box or your ideas about the card design. And like, it feels like a very interactive process. And it's so fun and exciting to follow along with this journey with you. Do you know what I mean?
thank
And
you.
so it's like, yeah, as that potential backer, like, there's absolutely no rush coming from the outside. Like
Thank you.
it's well worth the wait. And yeah, and the fact that, you know, you've opened up this process to make all of your followers part of the journey is such a privilege and such a treat for all of us. I'm speaking for myself. So
Thank you.
yeah.
And it's really, it can still be really scary too, because
Mm-hmm.
like, you know how people will, be well-meaning, but like
Yeah.
they can be a little pessimistic, you know.
Yeah.
I've had several people tell me, like, you need to stop posting your art because there's somebody out there who's going to screenshot every single thing that you post, and they're going to print a legal copy of your deck. And you know, if you post the last, like the 78th card before you start doing your box and your accessories, someone's going to have a knockoff version of that Afro Drip tarot ready to go while you're still trying to work on your. Really terrified me. That really left me with this like fear of like having my intellectual property stolen, but more so like just the labor, the time that I've put into
Yeah.
making this deck, and trying to make it where it's something that makes me happy, but also is like accessible to other people and understandable. It was just like, but if I don't share the pictures, people won't know.
Yeah.
And like, I still get nervous and afraid, and for some reason theft, like art theft, seems to be
Yeah.
like not a big deal and accepted in the tarot community,
Yeah.
even though it's like known that the labor behind it isn't being compensated. Like, I've seen people
Yeah.
say, oh well, if someone gifts you a knockoff deck, you're free of any guilt for accepting it if you know that it's a knockoff. And I just remember thinking, what a privileged perspective. Like, you know, not to offend anybody, but it was a, you know, cisgendered straight white male that said it. And when I read the comment, I just kept thinking, that sounds like something who comes from like something someone who comes from colonizers would be very
Yeah.
comfortable saying.
Oh,
Because
100%.
you know, oh, I didn't rape and pillage this village, my granddad did, but now, like, you know, he gave it to me, so I'm not guilty. Sometimes we carry the legacy of people who've done wrong before us.
Yeah.
So like, all of those layers were like on my mind when I had that conversation, and it still like terrifies me. But it's like you said, I feel like people get inspired, and I think that's
Yeah.
always a good thing. And people feel connected and involved
Yeah.
with the birthing of the deck. And I think that
Yeah.
that is gonna overshadow anybody who would have bad intentions and knowingly steal from me, because I think karma's real, and like spirit will get that
Huge.
person. So yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a bit of a write-off to say that, oh, well, my white colonizer ancestors did the thing. It's not on me. It is on you on a day-to-day basis moving forward to do something about it and to change how you engage and interact with these spaces and items. And I mean, I wouldn't hang on to something if someone gave it to me and I knew it was a knockoff. And that's such a huge issue in the tarot community now. Like, there's so many artists whose work is getting ripped off, and it just makes me absolutely ill. And I would rather own lots of tarot decks and make sure that they were coming directly from the artist or a reliable retailer to ensure that that artist is being fully compensated from their work, because that is my responsibility here and now. And that's something that I can do as an ethical person to ensure that I'm not contributing to that larger problem, because you always have a choice. And I think that's the thing that people don't understand, is it is a choice. Every purchase that you make is a choice. Where you choose to put your money and you invest your time and your resources is 100% a choice, right? And so there is a level of responsibility to that, right? And I know the threat of content theft is huge, and I sympathize with that, because as a creator that must be incredibly intimidating and disheartening. But I'd like to believe that there's enough of us that believe strongly about this that would support your work and support what you're doing and enjoy that process enough. Like, that feels like a very fear-based approach. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I don't know. Yeah, I don't
That's
have
what
an
I
answer
choose to
for it.
think.
But
I just,
yeah.
whenever I think about like the messages people send me and the comments that I get, I feel like if I focus on the hypothetical of something bad happening with my art,
Mm-hmm.
I'm magnetizing that reality to come to my experience. And I don't
Yeah.
want that. I don't want that at
Yeah.
all. I want, you know, to enjoy making this deck, and I want people to feel connected to the imagery, and
Mhm.
I want to meet a need in the tarot space for folks that, you know, want bright colors but detailed
Yeah,
imagery, and see themselves represented, or have their
yeah,
understanding of the cards expanded through someone else's
yeah,
interpretation. I want things to be good, so that's what I focus
yeah,
on every time I like upload something new. I'm just like,
yeah,
this is serving a good purpose, and
yeah,
that's what I'm going to magnetize to myself. So like, I'm
absolutely.
right there with you. I try to avoid that
Yeah.
like fear-based thinking because it's real.
Oh, it is. And it can stand in the way of your ability to create too, right? Like if you set up those blocks for yourself, it really gets in the way of the process. And it's always fascinating to me that these people that come in with the best of intentions. I have someone that I know like that who I can't talk to them about specific things because I know that the negativity that's going to come back at me is going to crush my soul just a little bit. So there's certain
Mhm.
conversation topics that I don't have. And her daughter is friends with my daughter, so I keep the contact up because of that. And you know, she's essentially a good person, but there's this element of fear that is so much a part of that. And I know it's not coming from a bad place, but it's like you need to protect yourself a little bit and like insulate that creative spark within you in order to make sure that it doesn't get doused. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I would love to believe that at their core, most people are decent and would do the work to, you know, educate themselves about what's going on within the tarot community with all of these fraudulent decks and different sites like Wish, and even Amazon is
Yeah.
responsible for carrying some of them, and Walmart. Like it's much more part of the mainstream than I think a lot of people think.
Mhm.
But that's where I love like indie retailers and small shops that
Mhm.
go directly to tarot creators. So, you know, if you can't order a deck that maybe comes from the UK and is prohibitive with shipping, you know that there's your local shop that you can go to. And that's where I think shopping local is so important because people that own businesses like that, like I know Sarah from Calling Corners is absolutely fabulous and she really puts a lot of effort into, she carries mass market decks, but she also carries indie decks as well and creates a relationship with the people that she buys from, and
Mhm.
it creates that sense of trust and that sense of responsibility. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's the aspect of shopping small that isn't fully appreciated maybe because
Mhm.
it's enticing to look at something like Amazon, and I'm still guilty of buying from them every so often when I can't find something elsewhere, but there's definitely power in buying something directly from
Mhm.
the creator or from a trusted retailer, right? So
Mhm.
I'm going to get off my soapbox, but that's something I feel so passionately about because it's a real thing. And I know so many tarot deck creators who have had their work stolen and are not
Mhm.
being compensated from it for it. And I know, like I've seen you mention the amount of time that it takes to create even just one of these cards, right? And it's just it's a travesty to have that happen. And I wish there was more of a crackdown on that. I'm not sure how that would what that would look like, but yeah.
And I think it's ironic too, just because we live in such a capitalistic society where it's like we're encouraged to monetize everything, like
Yeah,
everything. If
yeah,
like there are people who literally sell their bath water to people that
yeah,
want to do whatever with it, you know, like to
yeah,
each his own. But I'm just
yeah,
like, we seem to have this weird relationship where we like worship the almighty dollar and like venerate people who have a whole bunch of money, but
yeah.
when it comes specifically to art,
Mm-hmm.
for some reason we have this cognitive dissonance where it's like, oh, it's just some pictures, so
Yeah,
there's no value in it. But yet you're
yeah,
using this 78 set of pictures to communicate with your higher self, to give people guidance that are then giving you money, you know? Like it's
yeah,
just, I just find it really interesting how not everyone, and I wouldn't even say a lot, but there are definitely
yeah,
some in the tarot community that love what tarot is without having seemingly any love for the people that make tarot. Like
yeah,
it's just, it's weird, but yeah, I'm gonna
yeah.
get off my soapbox too.
No, no, but I totally, and I think part of it has to do with that capitalistic society and what we place value on, right? The value is on mathematics, and it's on mathematics, on math and engineering and, you know, medicine. And we're not willing to pay for healthcare, but we are willing, you know, hold doctors up in veneration. I mean, we do have funded healthcare here in Canada for most things, or some things. There's some things that aren't covered, so we are lucky that way. But even in terms of funding on a government level. Like the first places that funding is taken away from is education, it's healthcare, it's all of these core services, and yet there's value placed on these industries, you know, the Amazons of the world and all of that. And I feel like it's almost a reflection of what we place value on in a capitalistic society. I mean, not to be too grandiose in terms of scope, but I think it's unfortunate because a lot of people tend to, as a former actor and art person, people were very dismissive of what I was focusing on in terms of, like, I've got a master's in theater studies and I went to theater school and I did all those things, and there was this kind of dismissiveness about that, as it wasn't like real work, right? And it is real work. Like, I poured blood, sweat, and tears into everything that I did, but I mean, my certificate, my master's degree, isn't good for much because it isn't in one of those core fields, you know. And it's an interesting reflection on what, and I think people think that art is easy, you know, it's no big deal, but it's not. And I think anyone who actually tried it would see that very quickly, you know. It's just like childcare and education and all of those different things that people take for granted, right? So it's kind of a larger social issue, I feel, where that's concerned. Yeah,
I agree. But I feel like with tarot becoming more and more popular, like really all over the world, I think there's going to be a lot more minds and voices coming into the community that recognize this as a problem. And hopefully, you know, more and more will come into the fold that have positions that can actually impact the legality of pirating a deck, or, you know, like whatever, you know. I feel like the more people, like, I hate to say it, but like the more mainstream tarot becomes, the more respected it will become. When it's just like this niche thing that a few people over here are talking about, it's easy to dismiss it. It's easy to say, oh yeah, that's a really cool picture, and not think about the fact that someone had to paint this, and all 77 other paintings in this set that they've then made accessible to you in something that you can hold in your hands and ask spirit questions to. I think that when there's more understanding of that, we'll have more people taking it seriously when someone who spent thousands of hours making a tarot deck finds it listed on Wish for $275, and you're just like, what's going on here? Like, for the art thief, that's all profit. For the person that created the thing that they're profiting from, it's nothing, and they spent however much of their time, their life, birthing this thing. So hopefully, like, that will start to change sooner rather than later, because it's really disheartening. Like, I'm friends with Chris Ann, the creator of the Year's Tarot. We you know, every so often we'll just kind of check in with each other. And I remember when she first found out her deck was pirated, like, my heart hurt for her, because I just remembered how much love and time she put into each and every card. I mean, she had a process similar to mine where she was sharing them on social media and getting feedback. And to think that someone somewhere decided, yeah, I'm just going to take this and sell it and make money, even though I had nothing to do with this creation. It angered me, and it hurt me on her behalf. And I think that kind of feeds into part of the fear that I have of the same thing happening to me. But, you know, focusing on the positive, like, hopefully that will become less and less of an issue, because it really, it's harmful. You know, I think people don't think about the fact that this is causing harm, but it does.
It is 100%, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. And Chris Ann's Sacred Creators was the first deck I ever backed on Kickstarter back in like 2016. And I followed the evolution of her work on the Light Seers and the Muse Tarot. And I had another tarot account at the time before I started up this one. And it was so magical to be able to be a part of that process. And it was such a privilege to be led into her world of creation, you know. And I was so gutted when I saw that the decks had been ripped off, because it was so clear to me how much work and love and care she had put into it. I mean, all tarot creators do. And it was just, it's doing such a disservice and such harm to artists when their work is stolen like that. And when you look at tarot, I mean, it's a tool for evolution and for growth and for spiritual development. And so it feels like even more disgusting to have that happen when it's something that is created with such care, you know. I'm actually interviewing Chris Ann next month. I'm really excited about her new deck. Oh, I can't wait. It's amazing.
I love how whimsical it is, like with all the animals and stuff. It's lovely. So cute.
Yeah, it's so magical. I'm so excited to, I do my daily spread with like 4 different decks, and I'm so excited to combine all 4 of them together, because I find with, like, her decks are all so unique and so different. And yet I feel like with creators that are putting their energy into something, there's a through line that comes. Do you know what I mean? And it's going to be so fun to see how they play together and work together. And I've got so much respect for her work. It's just incredible.
And she's just such a sweet person in general. Like,
yeah.
anytime I've asked her for advice or
Yeah.
just anything, she's always so present, and she holds nothing back. You know, she's so approachable and humble, and she's just such a sweet person. Like, I love Kristen. I could gush her forever.
Oh, I should as well. Absolutely. Yeah, I've got the utmost respect for her. And I thought it was so amazing with Jamie Sawyer's Pocket of Peers. My copy just arrived last week, and I was so thrilled. I still have to do a flip through of that, but I love that Chrysan is a star card. Like,
I know. Isn't that perfect? Like, I feel like that's
for her.
Perfect. Yeah,
it really is. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I should check. We've been chatting for a while. Oh, wow. We've been on for almost 2 hours. I can't believe it. It feels like it's been like 5 minutes in the best possible way. I feel like when you hit a groove with conversation, it's just so lovely. So thank you so much for giving me so much of your time. And
thank you for having me.
All of this. I was excited about your deck before, but after having this opportunity to chat with you, I'm even more excited, because it's such, being able to talk to you about your process is so magical, you know, and all the details about renaming the cards and the different suits and the whole process. I mean, that's truly magical, and I'm really appreciative of you taking the time to talk to me about all of this. It's like,
thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I feel like, you know, when 2 tarot lovers get together, especially if they're both Geminis, and I think I noticed you're a Scorpio moon.
I am.
I'm a Scorpio rising, so we've got 2 of the big 3 in common.
Yeah,
so, I feel like when that happens, the vibe is just so natural. I love it.
Absolutely. Oh, that's incredible. Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, and I hope that you have a fabulous rest of your weekend, and I will be keeping up with all of your beautiful creations.
Excellent. So all right, well, take care. Thank you so much.
You as well. Oh, thank you for joining me. This was wonderful.
Talk to you soon.
Take care.